Cross Politic begins in 3, 2, 1.
I have a heart that breaks for a dying city.
Stop cursing your future.
Is not true.
For all intents and purposes, I am a woman.
No government, no political system has ultimate supremacy. Jesus is King of Kings, and it's about time our nation return in humble submission to his lordship.
You are not protecting women. You are authorizing the destruction of 500,000 little women every year.
But I didn't start it. But sir, with all due respect, that's the argument of a 5-year-old. I didn't start it.
Right, when the Spirit comes upon people, they go to war. They go to battle, and the enemies of God are driven back, and they're slaughtered.
You are listening to Cross Politic with Gabe Wrench, the Water Boy, Pastor Toby Sumter, and the Chocolate Knox.
Welcome y'all to Cross Politic.
Hey.
Thank you for joining us, Choc Knox.
You see that down there?
Pastor Toby Sumter.
What's up, man?
In the house.
Hey.
I'm so happy to see you.
Happy St. Patty's Day.
Hey, yeah, and we're coming at you from northern Idaho in the middle of the millennium.
Go ahead, since you teased it. Who do we have coming on the show?
Jesus is King of Kings, and our guest coming on the show here in the next segment, actually the next two segments, is Gary DeMar. So
Uncle Gary.
Stick around for that.
Godfather Gary?
Yeah, Godfather Gary.
Godfather Gary, watch out.
I was scared of him. So I started working at American Vision, and Uncle Gary scared me. Because he just looks at you sometimes. He doesn't say anything, and you're thinking you're telling a joke, you're telling a good story. He'll look at you like, huh. And he walked away, and I was like,
that's it.
I was like, he doesn't like me. I went to Joe McDermott. I was like, does he like people? He's like, oh no, Gary's great, man. He loves you. You're awesome. He wouldn't. No, yeah, exactly. And go back, and then Cy comes to town because we're shooting How to Answer the Fool.
Okay.
And he's like shaking hands with Cy. Oh man, love your apologetics. I'm like, who is this guy?
Who's Gary? Yeah.
And then so after a while working with him, coming to his room, and he's lifting weights. He has a full weight set up there. Uncle Gary's a beast, man.
Wow.
In his office?
In his office.
Man,
in his office.
I feel like such a sissy.
dude, he's a beast.
Oh,
he's a beast.
Gracious.
That should be part of your pastoral training.
Seriously,
yeah,
a weight bench in every pastor's study.
This is what it's like to be sanctification.
Right,
You're lifting weight.
Yeah.
You're fighting temptation.
He has a picture. If you search the internet for Gary DeMar, there's an old kind of black and white picture with him with an afro.
I love that
Uncle
picture.
Gary is super tan.
Yes.
He's Italian, so he's going to get it. Super tan with an afro, but you would have thought he was a brother.
Yep.
And so I was
wasn't he mistaken when he was wearing that afro?
I didn't even know it was him. So I was like, hey,
That's
man,
hilarious.
this dude kind of looks like you. Whose son is this?
That's hilarious.
Yeah, you know. Just want to know what happened.
You tell me about that, brother.
You want to tell me about him? And he's like, oh, that's me. And I'm like, whoa. Oh, Uncle Gary, what's up, Unc?
And then did you give him some love?
You know what? I went to shake his hand, and he gave me the whole full brother handshake, and I was kind of confused. I was looking like, where did you? Okay, nah, you stop right now. Where'd you learn that from? You tell me right now.
Who taught you that?
Where did you get this? He's like, oh man, I'm an athlete. We all hung together, did the thing. You know what I'm saying?
The thing.
It's groovy, baby. And I was like,
oh man.
So we got real close. I love Uncle Gary.
He's coming on.
Huge blessing for my.
What are you drinking in that bottle, man?
What?
What are you drinking in that bottle?
Just water.
You're supposed to have a paper bag around that?
I'm testing some Cross Politic water.
Ooh, we get a label. We get a Cross Politic
That's
label.
a huge bottle.
Branded.
Speaking of which, we need to direct you guys to our store. We got some merch up at our store. We got some
new stuff.
We're working on it. Amazon merch finally opened up to us.
Yes.
So we're getting some Amazon merch up.
Really?
Yeah.
It's on Amazon.
Rock your Cross Politic shirts.
Yep.
Go get
So
your
we're going
Cross
to be on
Politic
Amazon
hats.
here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Jake in here.
Jake, studio engineer.
He's rocking the Cross Politic green.
The Catholic green
for St. Patrick's Day.
And I got Protestant orange on.
Catholic green, really?
Yes.
Hey man, don't ever let a Catholic sit behind you, dude. Never get that. Not if you're a Protestant. They've been known to take us out a few times.
Yep.
Just saying.
It's Mardi Gras. it's always Mardi Gras when you sit behind.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to some news for this week. I mean, man, there's just so much going on.
Can I just say something?
We can't do the show enough. We need to be doing the show almost
every day.
I think, yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you why. So I have the news alerts that happens on my phone. I'm trying to stay current now. Wow. And so
I think it's better not to.
I agree with you, and here's why: because it's blowing up my data plan.
Right?
Oh, really?
Because whatever Trump is doing is causing the news and the media to freak out.
Wow.
Almost every 15 minutes, I'm getting an update from the White House, an update from the White House, an update about Trump. an update about.
Yeah.
It's always something coming from the White, and it doesn't stop. It's almost every 15 minutes, and I'm like, what is he doing over there?
Yeah.
I mean, he's just completely thrown a grenade into, and I kind of like it, into everybody's plans. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I just think he needs to upset conservatives a little more, along with the liberals, so everybody's kind of upset together. But right now,
and before we get to Trump, so we're going to get to some Trump news here real quick.
Yeah,
But first on my list is this is actually the best sporting month of the year. Yes,
I'm gonna turn this. Let's close
March
this.
Madness.
I got some spam. I got some spam email from Gabriel yesterday.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I got that too.
Did you get that too? Were you on that list?
I'm not picking brackets.
My bracket is perfect except for one loss today.
I only have time to pray. I ain't got time for no brackets.
You guys.
Yeah, we're Christians up in here, Gabriel.
All right, best sporting month of the year, and I get no love from my
just
peeps.
Just so everybody knows, Gabe is watching March Madness while we're doing the podcast.
It's on my iPad
He's
right now.
watching
Right now, I'm watching Creighton in Rhode Island.
I totally felt like you were two-timing us. Like you weren't really concentrating. Like I keep saying stuff, and you're just like,
Because I knew what Gary was going to say. I knew where he was going to go. So I just finished up the USC game while I was watching. Oh man,
I'm watching
so
you getting fist bumps over here and like fist pumps, and I'm thinking like, what? Oh, he didn't even have a point there.
He might as well not come
because USC won in the last 15 seconds of the game, and that kept my bracket good.
Turn off.
All right,
tablet,
let's get into some
news.
Let's get into some news besides sports, besides March Madness. So you guys might have
baseball starts next month.
Yeah,
now that's some Christian stuff right up in here.
Okay,
man, we need to have a debate on that. so Trump released
holy sport of baseball.
Trump released his budget, his proposed budget this year. I don't know if you guys seen any of the news going around, but his proposed budget, at least at this point, some of the details I haven't dug too deep in it yet, but some of the things that he's proposed so far, it comes with 11 agencies or departments losing funding. So agencies and departments.
I already like that.
Yeah, right.
I don't know what it is yet, but I like the fact that government departments are losing their funding.
Yeah.
So is it anybody that's of worth?
National Endowments of the Arts and Humanities.
Yes.
Okay.
Corporation for Public Broadcasting, CBP.
Yes.
Which is the agency that funds
NPR.
NPR.
Please say NPR. Please say NPR.
and PBS. They fund that. That's $45
Wait,
million
PBS can go away. They're going to lose some funding?
NPR and PBS are under that.
Oh. I think I like that.
Legal Service Corporation. Some of these are just redundant.
Wait. Does that mean no more Sesame Street?
Well, I mean, come on, man.
I'm just wondering.
They could get funding. I mean, NPR and PBS
let's
can
just
get
pass
funding.
around the bucket for Sesame Street, as long as they don't do the gay thing.
But I thought they did.
Did they really? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Defund,
sure they did.
defund Sesame Street. I'm in.
U.S. Trade and Development Agency, Woodrow Wilson International Program for Scholars.
They don't.
Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation, Denali Commission.
Are these all like completely getting defunded, or they're just getting cut?
Completely defunded.
Oh.
So these are the ones that I've listed off. They're getting completely defunded.
Okay.
And then he's got a number of other agencies are losing. Let me just run through this real quick, and then I get some things for you. A number of other agencies are getting cut. 13%, 16%. The housing and urban development's getting cut. Department of Transportation's getting cut. Budget's about 12%. Their budget's getting cut, not the department. Their budget's getting cut about 12%. Department of Health and Human Services, their budget's getting cut about 16%. Department of Education, budget's getting cut 13%. EPA, give me a percentage. How much do you think EPA is getting cut?
15%?
30.
Oh.
A little over 30%.
Wow.
Which is I think is really of course I'm happy with a lot of that. But the one problem I have in all this is he's actually increasing military spending.
So what we have here is he's throwing a bone basically to conservatives.
Yeah, right. And he's increasing military spending by I wanted to say around 10%, and military spending and Homeland Security are both getting an increase in spending.
Yeah,
which is a conservative thing. It's like you cut over here, and then you.
But it's a Republican.
It's a Republican thing. Yeah, let me put it that way. It's better.
Right.
So Republicans, what do? They always increase our defense budget, and our defense budget is our defense budget is. I should probably release this link when I post the episode. Our defense budget is about $682 billion.
Whoa!
As of 2012, that's the last numbers that I have in front of me. Comparing this chart, this is a chart comparison, and that equals the top 10 other countries' budgets total, defense budgets total.
In the world.
in the world. And China, Russia, UK, Japan, France, Saudi Arabia, India, Germany, Italy, Brazil
combined
have a $652 billion budget combined, and U.S. is $680.
Well, when you go to occupy other people's countries,
yeah,
you kind of need some money to keep that going.
Yeah, we're in 100. We have military bases in 150 nations.
What percentage of that of our military budget? What piece of the pie is that for our total budget?
I don't have that stat in front of me.
Well,
but
what are you good for?
I know, seriously. But that doesn't
Stop
matter.
watching that March Madness.
Because our social services, welfare, and all that still are the largest part of our budget.
Really?
Are they?
Absolutely.
Bigger than military?
Yep. If you add up all our social services, they're bigger than military. Because our budget problem here in the U.S.
Is any of that getting trimmed?
It's an entitlement problem.
No, sure, I know.
If we dealt with our entitlements alone, we'd fix a lot of.
So is any of that getting trimmed? No.
I didn't go into Trump's budget on that side of things.
Just for a second, because when we're talking about we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about welfare, we're talking about help, people who are not working and taking care of them. I think, this is a whole nother conversation, talk about the military side of this, but just that side of it, as far as our healthcare, social services, all that stuff. How does the gospel come in and really? I think that points to a gospel problem. It's not like, oh, wow, it's not just a money problem.
Absolutely.
But it's a gospel problem. How, since you're just freshly back, Pastor Toby, let's just throw this one in your court.
From California stand.
Oh!
You know what? In California stand?
Yeah.
You got to buy your bags at the grocery store.
Yes, you do.
What?
You gotta buy your grocery bags.
Yeah.
Yeah, they charge you money.
5 cents a plastic bag because it hurts the environment, so you're paying to help the environment.
Oh my gracious.
But so you're president for a day. They show you the $680 billion.
This is my governor for a day question.
Right.
If you're president for a day,
always asking.
If you're president for a day,
always asking this question.
This is a great question.
Wait, hey, there's $600 billion for military, right?
That's 2012 numbers.
That's 2012, so 5 years ago, right?
But that's not for the social services.
So social services, though, you don't even. Let's just say that it's triple that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's say 10 billion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 10 billion. I wish. I'm sorry. It's 800 billion.
I think the larger problem with David is a math problem.
Yeah.
Shock. Anyway,
it's the vape I have. It's messing up my head.
And
so you're like, whoa. We'll deal with the military stuff in a second, but how do you fix this as a Christian?
Right. And
you're looking at this because I think it's easy for us to point out to everybody else and say, "Oh man, look what they're doing to."
How do you back out?
Yeah. How do you say, "Okay, guys, this is our plan to go about fixing this $800 billion entitlement program that we have?"
Right. Off the top of my head, really fast. Maybe I'll need to correct this, fix it. What I would probably want to do is I want to figure out. I think there are like veterans and elderly people and things like that. People in really extreme situations that either we have promised to provide for them or care for them.
Well, they promised Social Security to me.
Let the president talk. Don't interrupt, Mr. President.
Seriously.
He looked at me kind of mad.
I'm angry, Toby.
But I'm gonna. What I want to do is I want to get my best people. I got great people,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get the best people on this, and I'm gonna have them sift through, and I want to chop it. 75% of the budget. I'm gonna chop it, and immediately.
Wow.
And I'm gonna take maybe that last 25% of it, and I'm gonna send it to the people that I think are
your best.
That could die without.
I'm talking about primarily the people that really are like on the verge of death.
Yeah. Total poverty, total,
not like they have a big screen TV and they can't get the second iPhone.
Right.
And that kind of stuff. So I'm going to slash it massively. And I think that all that money, I want to give it back. I want to push it back. And so I want to slash taxes accordingly and send it back into the back to the people.
Yeah.
And I want to say the people need to take care of the people. You need to, businesses, think about your people. Communities, think about your people. Churches, think about your people. Families, think about your people. Reach out. Here it is. You do this. You do it better than the feds. You do it better than Big Brother.
So 75% cut, period.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. All right. Here's
maybe I should be more.
No.
Well, and
okay,
I think let me add to this real quick. I
right.
think a part of the problem is we backed ourselves into such a corner in all this that any change we do is going to cause problems.
Sure.
But that's what sin does.
Yeah.
Right? We get so far down the line in our sin, and then any sort of repentance is going to look drastic.
Yeah.
And maybe even catastrophic, at least in appearance.
So a slight modification of the same thing would be to say, like, create a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan in which we arrive at that destination incrementally. Yeah. So every year another 15% is lopped off or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but I think Gabe's right. I think it's gonna be catastrophic, but you've got to turn off the hose.
Biblically, is the government supposed to be taking care of the people in that way?
That's not their primary calling. I don't think that it's. Some people speak like if the government does anything like that ever, it's a high-handed sin. Yeah. I'm not convinced of that.
Okay.
But I would say absolutely the order is family first, then church.
Yeah.
Then I would say even society locally. You should much rather have people locally taking care of you than people 3,000 miles away from you. Yeah. But in certain kind of catastrophic situations, I don't have a problem with the governor or a president declaring a state of emergency, and sending the Red Cross in with emergency medical supplies and hot lunches because there's a massive a hurricane that wipes out the whole infrastructure. Yeah. I don't think that the federal government or the state government is overstepping God's boundaries by seeing this imminent threat to life and health.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means then they should be in charge of making sure that everybody gets a visit to the dentist every year.
But exactly. But if people are having more of their money back and are able to give more to their church, who is supposed to be taking care of the elderly, the widows, those who are in tough times, then we could see a catastrophic change for the better, right? So, but also the reason I like what you're saying. I just want to add one more thing. I think Gabe and I were talking about this earlier or the other day. Someone who is actually affected by the social programs, they have a very rough choice, and I don't think we think about it enough. That's why I like your position. Yes, give more money back to the people so they have their money. But then if they have that money and they want to go and start a business, the bureaucratic red tape, the licensing, all that stuff they have to do to get involved into the free market, they still don't have that opportunity, right? And so not only do we need to give them back the money, but we need to remove all the sanctions and the red tape that it takes to get involved in business, right? If I get my money back and I want to go start an oil company, I can't do that. Right. So how am I supposed to function in this world? Even though I have the money, I need another door to open up. I need the government to take their hand off of some stuff, right? So that I can get involved in those industries and make money and supply jobs for people, right? Money for people. So a person who's in a social program, they're saying, okay, I got this money coming from the government. I want to get off of that. And I believe a lot of people do want to get off. I think some people do want to get off of it. But they're saying if I go out into the workforce, I'm not even, everything's so hiked, insurance, all this other stuff like that. The fact that I have to have car insurance, I have to have house insurance, it forces a dollar amount on me that I can't afford to maintain apart from getting help from the government. So even if I launch out on my own, I'm going to die. So either I launch on my own and die, or I keep taking handout from the government. And so I think we have a two-pronged approach. It's give her the money back and releasing a more free market approach to industry.
Yeah. Agreed. Yes. Slash all those regs too.
Yeah. Well, I think, the reason why we've gotten in this situation is because our hearts have ultimately got greedy.
Yeah.
Our hearts have ultimately, which is weird because everyone thinks it's a poor problem, but it's actually a heart grasping problem. And then now we've turned into this entitlement budget moving forward.
Yeah.
And so we got this, let me actually tie it into this. Oh, that's it.
That's
wow.
it. You know what? This is what happens when you treat me mean.
Cutting me off.
Cutting you off.
Hey,
it just seemed like it was fast because you were watching your brackets.
That's right. Uncle Gary DeMar next when we come back on Cross Politic.
For 21 years and counting, New St. Andrews College has sought to obey Christ's Great Commission to disciple nations and build him a house. Not just in Jerusalem, but throughout the world. Not with stones and mortar, but with living stones. We build and fight. This is the task of a Christian liberal arts college, to equip students with the tools to build and fight. And this is our joyful task as we seek to graduate leaders who shape culture through wise and victorious living. To learn more, check us out online at nsa.edu/explore.
Canon Press is a publishing house located in Moscow, Idaho. At Canon Press, we create and provide products that sketch a vision of the whole life, a whole culture. A life full of beauty, tradition, education, community, laughter, and celebration. Unashamed of Christ, and sharply at odds with the values of modernity. A mature culture with the church at the center, living out the good life, one family at a time. We believe our book, audio, and visual selections reflect this exciting life that God has given us under the sun. As the wisest man said, go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. CanonPress.com.
Welcome back to Cross Politic. I've taken Toby's job.
Hey.
Because he never shows up anymore.
Not only are we happy to have our dear pastor, Toby Sumter, back in studio with us, but we also have my uncle, Uncle Gary DeMar. Now listen, I just want everybody to know I've coined the phrase Uncle Gary.
I love it. And
everybody's kind of, I think it should happen because Uncle Gary is really the uncle to post-millennial brethren, right? He's the guy who's, he's kind of cranky. No offense, Uncle Gary. But he loves you.
So if you're post-mill, Gary's your uncle?
He's your uncle. Yeah.
Okay.
But he's adopting nephews.
He is?
He is.
Okay.
And that's why we have him on the show.
Okay.
So that he can adopt a few nephews to the post-millennial world perspective.
I was going to say, like Godfather.
He's
Godfather.
He is, honestly.
Godfather Gary.
He had the blog.
I've got a website called Godfather Politics.
That's
too.
right.
That's right. I forgot. That's right. That's right.
And he does have some looks that he'll give you that'll make you think that he can have some people take you out.
He might leave a dead horse in your bed.
That's very possible.
So add to the introduction, where can you find out more information about Gary?
You can find out, I think all of his books and content that you can buy is on AmericanVision.org. Is it, Uncle Gary?
Yes.
AmericanVision.org. And you just came out with a new website, finally self-titled, GaryDemar.com.
Should have been Uncle Gary.
You know what? Let's buy that now.
Trying to keep it short.
Now, Uncle Gary, this is kind of special for me because when I first met you, I was making transition, or I guess I wasn't fully moved from my dispensational world.
He just wasn't out of the closet yet.
Right. Well, that's part of it. I was working at a ministry that was very full dispensational, and they had objections that I thought were valid objections. And you wrote a book that blew my mind. It was called Myth, Lies, and Half-Truths. And there were three things that I thought, like, for me, that was a turning block. It's like, if you're saying that the world is getting better, why do we still have so much trouble and hate and violence, and the world still feels like and looks like it's falling apart? And if that's the case, if things are getting better, then why does it still look like that? That was one of the issues. The second issue was, if Jesus is king of the world, if Jesus is ruling and reigning, this goes right into the last one I was just saying, why doesn't it look like a kingdom that Jesus is ruling and reigning on if he's conquered? And then the last one was, if we're not going to get raptured out of this joint. Yeah, I gave a pause for laughter. If we're not going to get raptured out of this joint, what are we supposed to be doing? Because for me, growing up, the rapture, and this is probably where you want to start at, the rapture was live your life to get ready to be raptured out of here for Jesus coming, which means the world had really, I didn't have any connection to the world outside of proclaiming the gospel for people to get saved and then to get out of here. And so when you start talking about we're not going to get raptured out of here, my question is, then what are we supposed to be doing?
Well, that's why I wrote Myths, Lies, and Half-Truths, because anytime I went out on the road and started talking about Christian worldview issues, inevitably there would be somebody in the audience would say, well, aren't we living in the last days? Israel became a nation in 1948, and isn't this a fulfillment of prophecy? And Jesus talked about wars and rumors of wars and so forth and so on. So I had to answer those kinds of objections, and that's what I did in Myths, Lies, and Half-Truths, and I combined it with another book called Last Days Madness and gave the exegetical reasons why most people are confused about the Bible prophecy issue, because Jesus was talking about the end of the old covenant world of Israel, which came with the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And everything that we're seeing today in our culture was seen way back then. I mean, Paul was dealing with homosexuality in Romans chapter 1. He was dealing with it in 1 Corinthians 6. He was dealing with it in 1 Timothy 1, in the book of Revelation as well. And I think Paul in 2 Timothy 3 is very clear. In the first 7 verses of 2 Timothy chapter 3, Paul is describing to Timothy how bad his world was. But then he goes on to say, but they will not make further progress, for their folly will be obvious to all. And I think that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing the collapse of a man-centered, very secular, naturalistic, materialistic worldview, coming to an end. And then you asked the inevitable question. So what, and Francis Schaeffer asked it years ago, how should we then live while this was taking place? And unfortunately, Schaeffer didn't really have an answer to that, because he also believed that the world was, on the verge of eschatological collapse. So your eschatology, your prophetic worldview makes a huge, huge difference in how you're going to look at evil around us. So we're the problem, because we won't address it and work through it all.
Well, you just made my head explode. You said that the world is collapsing, but then the other side you're saying, but the world's getting better. I don't understand. How is it collapsing, and then at the same time, how's it getting better?
Well, if you go back to the Old Testament and you look about Israel going into captivity, I believe it's in Jeremiah where God describes, I'm gonna pluck it up, and Zephaniah it literally talks about. If you go back and read Zephaniah, it sounds so apocalyptic. It's the end of the world language. He's going to wipe everything off the face of the earth. Read Zephaniah chapter 1. I'm going to wipe everything off the face of the earth. Now, if he was going to wipe everything off the face of the earth, then why is there a chapter 2 and a chapter 3? Because he shows that after this is all wiped out, he's going to bring about redemption to his people, and they're supposed to get to work in rebuilding what is going to be wiped off.
Right.
And what's interesting about that worldwide language of destruction, it was written specifically to Judah and Jerusalem. So that apocalyptic language that seems so universal was designed for a local judgment. So I mean, you got to put these things together before you can rebuild. You have to basically go in and with your bulldozers and knock down the old structures and the old ways of doing things.
When I was I went to New St. Andrews College for my undergrad in 1998.
Ooh, you old.
1998, I read Last Days Madness, and it was. I grew up in the Reformed tradition, grew up in the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, but I think there was definitely this sort of this default. Even though we have this sort of Reformed worldview, there was definitely a default of, but the world's going to end any minute, and so there was this disconnect. And you didn't. You sort of tried to do stuff, but you didn't really know why it mattered, and Last Days Madness was a significantly helpful book for me as a 17, 18-year-old trying to figure out how does this all work, and just walking through the texts in Matthew 24 and the other Olivet Discourse language in the Gospels, and then Revelation and so on. just showing carefully how each of those things it's answering the question, what about this temple? What about Jerusalem? What about Israel? And then going back into the Old Testament and showing how this is how God's been talking all along to his people, and it's not anything new with Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and look at the commentaries, in fact, that's what I've done more in this Wars and Rumors of Wars book. You go back and look at the older commentaries, and they understood that language. And if you look at the historian of the time, Josephus, I mean, he's basically, he's better at biblical exegesis than a lot of modern day conservative Christian scholars, and he's not even attempting to support the Christian religion.
That's right.
But you read the works of Josephus, and it sounds just like what Jesus is describing in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. It's all there. My position isn't new at all. I'm not that original. I just went back and just put it into a more digestible way of seeing it. And if Christians would latch on to this, that it would make a huge difference in the world today. And unfortunately, we're still kind of stuck in this, left behind. Jesus is coming back soon. I just saw a new book that came out by Bryant Wright, who's here in the Atlanta area. Jesus is coming back soon. The time is near, and just right around the corner from me, that there's a marquee outside of a church that Jesus is coming back soon. I mean, it just won't go away.
So really practically, when the Bible says the sun is going to go out, the moon is going to get turned to blood,
right,
stars are going to fall out of the sky, we read that and your instinct is to think that's the end of the world. But what are you arguing that symbolism, that language is actually saying?
Well, it's interesting you bring it up. We have a mutual friend. I won't name him because I don't want to ruin his ministry. He was. I did a video series on Matthew 24, and a mutual friend of ours had given him this video series that I did, and he started watching it. And every time he watched one of the 30-minute segments, he said, I believe he's making his case.
Yeah.
He says, but I don't understand how he's going to deal with the sun, moon, and stars language of Matthew 24:29. and after he watched that, it completely changed his view, because all I showed was, and anybody can do this, Jesus is quoting language from the Old Testament,
right,
which is descriptive of the fall of pagan nations. For example, Isaiah chapter 13 in Babylon. Mm-hmm. The heaven's going to be rolled up like a scroll. The sun is going to go dark. Of course, when the sun goes dark, the moon goes dark. And then you ask yourself the question, why would Jesus apply that Babylonian-type judgment language to Israel, sun, moon, and stars? Because you go all the way back to Genesis chapter 37, you will see that Israel is described as sun, moon, and stars.
Yeah.
It was Joseph's dream. And then you go into Revelation chapter 12. There's a woman with a crown of 12 stars on her head. She's standing on the moon, and she's draped with the sun, which is obviously, the representative of Israel who gives birth to the promised Messiah. Mm-hmm. And again, all of these older commentators saw that relationship. It isn't the end of the physical world. It was the collapse of an older covenantal view of the world, or the judgment on a particular nation.
Mm-hmm. And you basically were just saying a little bit ago that you hold really to the historic view of the end times and of the millennium and so forth. And that was probably up to about 1700s, maybe early 1800s when that started to shift. And the dominating view now is kind of premill theology, rapture, and there's obviously different shades of that.
Well, the idea of a pre-tribulational rapture, where you have to separate the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy from the other 69 weeks and put a gap. The prophecy clock supposedly stopped during Jesus' ministry when Jews rejected Jesus as the Messiah, which, by the way, did not happen. Mm-hmm. And then that 70th week won't start back up again until the rapture of the church. That is a 19th century. That is a 19th century doctrine. You go back before 1830 or so, and you won't find anybody who holds that position. There have always been Chiliasts or premillennialists around, but none of them believed that there was a separate rapture coming, and then a 7-year tribulation period, and then Jesus coming again after that, and then a 1,000-year of reign of Jesus on the earth. That is a brand new 19th century
Uncle Gary,
doctrine.
But everybody just missed it before then. Everybody just missed it. There's been plenty of things in our church history where the Trinity wasn't really defined clearly until later, and when they were in history. And so before that, it just wasn't. People just kind of knew it, or it was aware, but it wasn't there. It wasn't clear, and so it just had to be defined. And so dispensationalism, hey, you're post-mill, right? As they were digging through the scriptures, it just became clear that this was the doctrine that was biblical.
And we just missed it.
And we just missed it. I mean,
I always say, I don't know anybody reading the Bible who has ever come to the belief that the 70th week of Daniel is separated from the other 69 weeks with a gap of nearly 2,000 years, and that the church is going to be raptured before a 7-year period in which the temple is going to be rebuilt, and Antichrist is going to make a covenant with Israel, is going to break the covenant. 2/3 of the Jews are going to be slaughtered during that period, on and on and on. I don't know anybody reading the Bible who has ever come to that position on his or her own. But I have met numerous people in reading the Bible who have come to the position that Matthew chapter 24, Mark 13, Luke 21 refers to the events leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And the only people who believe in this end-time scenario of a pre-tribulational rapture are people who were taught that from somebody else. I don't know anybody who's ever come to that position on his or her own. But the other position, the position that I hold to, which all these commentators, Adam Clark, Matthew Henry, and John Gill, and even John Wesley to a certain extent, they all believe that those particular passages referred to events leading up to and including the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70.
Now, let me throw another passage at you that that people oftentimes point to. This is Thessalonians, the end of 1 Thessalonians 4, the beginning of chapter 5, right? So he says, we don't want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, presumably speaking of those who are dead. You may not grieve as others who do not have hope. We believe that Jesus died, rose again. Even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. We declare to you by a word from the Lord that we who are alive, who are left unto the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command and the voice of an archangel and the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we will always be with the Lord. Therefore encourage one another with these words. And then he continues into chapter 5. You yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains upon a pregnant woman. It isn't, one way of reading this would be to say, to say that the Lord isn't coming, it's not imminent, it's not going to come at any moment, it's not coming soon. Isn't that a way of saying, look, there's peace and security and don't worry about it? But Paul says is coming as a thief in the night.
That particular passage traditionally has been used for what we would call the second coming of Christ, and that's quite different from the rapture of the church. And I had a debate I debated Dave Hunt numerous times, and I asked him specifically, and I said, David, give me one verse in the Bible that says that that the church is going to be raptured before a 7-year tribulation period. And I knew he was going to take me to 1 Thessalonians 4. And I said, well, where in there does it say that the church is going to be raptured before a 7-year tribulation period? Well, he didn't have an answer because it doesn't say that. What the rapture advocates have to come up with is this passage. You got to find a passage that says the church is going to be raptured, taken up into heaven prior to a 7-year tribulation period. And then what follows that is a 1,000-year reign of Christ on the earth after Jesus comes back again. But when you read that passage, it ends with, and they'll be with the Lord forever. That has traditionally been a passage that refers to the second coming of Christ, not a rapture of the church, whether it's a pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, partial rapture or a pre-wrath rapture. That passage has nothing to do with the rapture traditionally. It has always had something to do with the second coming of Christ, which again traditionally has been sometime in the future that we don't have any idea when that's going to be.
Okay,
but see the dispensation. Go ahead.
No. Finish. I know you talk.
Well, and I've always asked this. In fact, I posted something the other day on my Facebook page, and this guy who's always comments on my stuff, and he he said I was ridiculing God's word and all this sort of thing, and it was over the soon coming of Christ and the rapture idea. And I said, Gavin, all I'm looking for is a single verse in the New Testament that says that the church is going to be taken off into heaven prior to a 7-year tribulation period. This is your fundamental doctrine. Where is the verse that teaches it? And it's just like the temple is going to be rebuilt. I said, give me a verse in the New Testament that says that the temple is going to be rebuilt again. Well, there isn't one. In fact, they even say there isn't a temple. I got this thick book by some guy who was talking about the temple, and he admits there's no verse in the New Testament that says the temple is going to be rebuilt. Tim LaHaye's argument on the why the rapture doesn't take place. There isn't a post-tribulational rapture after the 7-year period, and he'll say, well, when someone says, well, there's no verse for the pre-trib rapture, he says, well, there's no verse for the post-trib rapture either. And my comment, the reason there isn't a verse for either one is because there isn't any such thing as a rapture as a distinct event from the second coming of Christ. The New Testament does not talk about the church being taken off the earth prior to a 7-year period in which an antichrist makes a covenant with Israel and then breaks the covenant, and all hell breaks loose, and 2/3 of the Jews living in Israel are going to be slaughtered. They don't like to talk about that part about their love for Israel.
Right.
And because I had a little again on Facebook, and this guy would not answer the question. I said, well, how do you deal? And I had a debate with Michael Brown not too long ago, and I said, Michael, I said, you talk about Israel in the future. I said, how do you deal with Zechariah 13:8, which talks about 2/3 of the Jews are going to be slaughtered during this time that you say God is going to restore Israel? I said, how is that a restoration of Israel where God has to kill 2/3 of them during this period of time? How do you deal with that? Well, he said, I really don't know how to deal with that verse. And there is no way to deal with that verse.
Oops.
That's the problem. I can deal with that verse. I know exactly what it's referring to.
Yep.
And it refers to the events leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. But if you study the Olivet Discourse, Jesus is very clear. He says this is going to happen before your generation passes away. When you see these things happen, you better head for the hills. Get out of the city. Go out into the mountains. He warned them to stay out of the city when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, as Luke's version says it. But today, these people are encouraging Jews to go to Israel. I said, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
For every 3 that go in, 2 of them are going to be slaughtered. And what Charles Ryrie calls Israel's greatest bloodbath.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Gary, you need a drink of water. and while you're taking that drink of water, we're going to go to break here. But I want you to think about, if you had to convince a dispensationalist to switch his position, I want you to think about, if you actually had to talk directly to one, what and how would you...
Like if there was one in the studio,
maybe. Just think about if there was one in the studio that you wanted to talk... I mean, who was a dispensationalist. What would you... I want you to think about this while we're taking a break. What would you say to him, and what would you think would be the thing that would convince him, or you would question him and say, okay, this is going to help you change your position. Okay, think about that. When we come back, more with Uncle Gary. Go to AmericanVision.org and get some of his books. It's so valuable. It's so valuable. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how eschatology matters in our world. Next on Cross Politics.
This is Cy Timbrunke with Answer Anyone Apologetics. Somebody comes up to you and says, I don't believe in God. And what do? We give them evidence. Look at the complexity of the eye. Look at this paper fragment. Look at these rock layers. And you've studied your rock layers. You wipe the floor with them. What's he going to do? He's going to go home and Google rock layers. You want him to repent and put his trust in Jesus Christ, and he's Googling rock layers. Congratulations. The next day you run into a PhD in geology and he wipes the floor with you. You see, when you do apologetics wrong, you have to be an expert in geology, biology, astrophysics, nuclear chemistry, you name it. You have to be brilliant. The problem is, there's always someone smarter than you. In John 10:27, Jesus did not say, my sheep hear your really good argument. He said, my sheep hear my voice. In Luke 21:15, Jesus said, I will give you a mouth and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. The power of God for salvation is not in your brilliant arguments. As Romans 1:16 tells us, it's in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Apologetics is easy. Read your Bible and do what it says. For more apologetic answers, visit AnswerAnyone.com.
Hey, welcome back. Cross Politic. This segment is brought to you by a bacon cheeseburger
from A&W.
From A&W. And
did you not eat before the show?
No, I'm hungry, man. We got Gary DeMar with us still in the studio for a second segment. This is a twofer, guys.
Yeah,
man.
I found out more about Gary. Uncle Gary grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He's a graduate of Western Michigan University. Earned his MDiv at Reformed Theological Seminary.
RTS.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have two grown sons, and you guys are in Atlanta. Now, there's a whole pile of books. Oh, my gracious.
You got to talk about his grandkids, too.
But, well, it's not on here.
I know. Uncle Gary, do you not love your grandkids? Why are they not on your bio?
At least
I've got nine now.
Nine grandkids.
Congratulations.
Had one just a week before I had mine.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Gary's been interviewed by Time Magazine, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and the BBC, and Sean Hannity. He's done numerous radio and television interviews, including The Bible Answer Man, hosted by Hank Hanegraaff. Newspaper interviews with Gary have also appeared in the Washington Times, Toledo Blade, the Sacramento Bee, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and the Chicago Tribune. So, this is kind of
Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
Why did Sean Hannity have you on, Gary? Was he trying to predict the end times?
No. He was here in Atlanta before he went to Fox. He was here in Atlanta. There was a huge controversy during the 1996 Olympics over homosexual rights in Cobb County, where I live, and there were supposed to be some venues in Cobb County dealing with the Olympics, and the Cobb County commissioners had opposed giving special benefits to same-sex couples, and that just caused an absolute uproar. And my organization, American Vision, had gotten together 278 pastors and brought them. Can you imagine that? 278 pastors actually agreeing on something.
Yeah.
To Cobb County, to Marietta Square.
Wow.
And we had a meeting there. And anyway, some guy who didn't like some of my political views made some very, very. Had an article in Creative Loafing. David, I don't know if you remember Creative Loafing, that magazine that they would put it outside restaurants here, and
yes,
terrible pro-homosexual, very disgusting magazine. Anyway, it mentioned some things that Sean Hannity had supported things that we were saying. Then this guy said, "Well, Gary DeMar believes this and this." Anyway, Sean had me on the show with this guy, and that was my so-called interview. It had nothing really to do with eschatology. It had more to do with politics.
It always has to do with eschatology, Uncle Gary.
Always
has to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
To bring it full circle.
To bring it full circle. Speaking, so someone, let's just say they were in studio and was listening, and you had a shot to try and move them from a dispensational perspective to a post-millennial perspective. What would be your pitch? What's your this is going to kill it?
That's a pretty big leap from getting somebody to move out of dispensationalism and postmillennialism in one setting. So you're dealing with two things here.
You can do it. Yeah.
It's basically tearing up and then replanting. So the first thing you have to do is you've got to tear up. And where I always begin is definitions, and I'll say, okay, what are the essential elements of dispensationalism? And the essential elements of dispensationalism is not the fact that there are different dispensations. I mean, if you can go back through history, and people believe that the Bible is progressive revelation and so forth and so on. So it's not the idea that there are different dispensations. The unique feature of dispensationalism is the pre-tribulational rapture. And the other one is, of course, a literal interpretation of the Bible. And so I start there. And I'll start with, I say, give me the essential elements of dispensationalism, and I focus them in on pre-tribulational rapture. And I'll say, now give me a verse in the Bible, in the New Testament, that says the church is going to be raptured prior to a 7-year tribulation period. Silence.
Yeah.
Because most people have never really thought that. They've just heard this all their lives. They've been to church and, talk about a pre-tribulational rapture. So give me a verse that teaches that. And what's that?
No, we're listening.
It just so happens that we have a dispensationalist in the studio. Oh, hi. Hey, Miles.
Revelation 3:10. Is that your verse?
Hold on 1 second. Miles, come over here. Come on, jump on the mic, Miles.
Oh.
Miles
we're forcing Miles' hand.
Miles is a friend of mine. Look. Everybody give Miles a hand. He doesn't.
Thank you, Miles.
I'm here for the ambush.
Uncle Gary. Miles is a filmmaker from California. Happens to be visiting me here in Idaho. We're working on a project, and he didn't know he was in for this today.
Not at all.
It just so happened that his hotel kind of kicked him out a little early, and I just found out that he's actually a dispensationalist. It was like, this is perfect. We have Uncle Gary, the dispensationalist lover, and Miles Ornelas, who happens to be a dispensationalist. So you actually get to talk to a dispensationalist. Look at that. God works in mysterious ways.
Did I hear Revelation 3:10?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Miles is just going to swallow it. Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's start Revelation 3:10. It's a very good verse to start with. Let me just say, you're the first person that's ever used Revelation 3:10. So
you want to give me a chance to recount.
That's okay. Now, okay. So there are two. Remember, there are two things we're talking about: the literal interpretation of the Bible. So Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his bondservants the things which must shortly take place. Verse 3, blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of the prophecy and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near. Now, you can do this on your own, but you go through the whole entire New Testament and look up every word, every time the word near and shortly are used, you will find that they always mean near and shortly. And
not 2,000 of years.
Not right. You can't, and that's what I always tell people to do. I said, plug in the idea of imminency any moment, and any moment can be from tomorrow to 2,000 years. Try to plug that interpretation into those places where you see near and shortly, and see what you come up with. It just doesn't work. So then you go to let's look at 3:10. And by the way, Revelation 3:10 is written within the context of 7 churches that were alive and well in the first century. And so, this is the church at Philadelphia, and that church of Philadelphia was in existence when John wrote the book of Revelation. So let's look at Revelation 3:10. Because you have kept the word of my perseverance. Now he's talking to the people in the church of Philadelphia. Not talking to you and me. He's talking first, primary audience, the church of Philadelphia. I also will keep you, not you, but them, you, from the hour of testing that that hour which, listen to this, is about to come. The Greek word there is mello, and that Greek word means just that, about to. And about to means, well, it's about to take place. And since I believe the book of Revelation was written prior to the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, because Revelation chapter 11 says that John was told to measure the temple, and the temple was not there after after AD 70, so he's told to measure the temple. So now let's go back. So we got the time indicators of 1:1 and 1:3. You know, the temple's still standing, Revelation chapter 11. We got a historic church in Philadelphia, not Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia, Mississippi, but Philadelphia church way back when. And it's that I will keep you from the hour of testing, that hour which is about to come upon the. Now here I don't know what your translation has, but my translation has whole world.
Yeah.
Now, okay. Now what's important about this, if you're really going to do good, sound biblical work, you got to go to the original language, and that's the Greek. And the Greek word there is oikumene. It's not cosmos. It's the same Greek word that's used in Luke 2:1. That there was a Caesar Augustus. There was supposed to be a tax upon the whole world. The Greek word there is oikumene, and it's translated in most translations today as inhabited earth, and they'll put in the margin, they'll say Roman Empire. By the way, it's the same passage that's used in Acts chapter 11 that talks about there will be a famine over the entire oikumene, inhabited earth, Roman Empire. It's the same word that's used in Matthew 24:14, where it talks about the gospel being preached in the whole world. It's oikumene.
Uh-huh.
So
and
this is dealing with,
real quick, Gary, isn't oikos does mean house? Isn't there kind of root? There's a root there.
Right. The word, the oikos. Right. Oikos means house. That's where we get the word oikos, oikonomic, economics. The lawful, nomos means law. The lawful ordering of a household.
House. Yeah. Right.
So right, oikumene. And so I kind of interpret oikumene translated as political boundary. It's the existing political house, geographical boundary of that particular time. Come upon the whole oikumene to test those who dwell upon the. And here's another translation issue: is it earth or land? It really doesn't matter. Because we use the word earth in a local way, but it can also just simply be translated as land, as you find in Luke chapter 21. So this passage has got nothing whatsoever to do with the church being taken off the earth before a 7-year tribulation period. This verse deals with the actual tribulation that was going to take place before that generation passed away, like Jesus was talking about, and Jesus had warned about. And so this verse, I don't know anybody who ever used this for the rapture. They usually use
Miles. You got some explaining to do.
No, I know that's the go-to verse for MacArthur,
right?
For MacArthur, and
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I'd love to sit down with John MacArthur and talk about these things, but
now Miles is no slouch. He's a solid dude. He's a guy who studied theology, and so he knows. So I'm interested to see, Miles, like, you're hearing this. Your response is,
well,
that's a microphone, so just put your mouth like right in
it.
There you go. Hey, Miles, how you doing?
Good.
Nice voice.
That's a radio voice.
Hey.
Hello. My only issues, I guess, are it seems that excuse my vernacular. I'm not.
We'll beep it out.
An educated fellow, but cats who typically talk about eschatology, everything does come down to, in my experience in discussing this, your view of the Bible. And he said, how do you explain dispensationalism? I don't think it's the dispensations either. I do think it's my view of Scripture. And that it is, I don't see it as overwhelmingly or the majority of it being allegorical. I see it as literal. And the reason why is because I don't think.
Keep in mind, I haven't given you anything that's allegorical. I have stuck with the text. We haven't even gone into interpretation so much. I've stuck with the text.
Right. So I wasn't necessarily speaking of you, but just in my experience, that seems to be. And so what happens with that is that I feel like there is this liberty that most people take that are post-mill or on-mill, that whenever it suits their theological persuasion, they will say, well, this is allegorical. Well, this is not literal, and so on and so forth. And
if
so,
you're referring to like the sun, moon, and stars, stuff like that, we take it allegorical, meaning
right, or even the angel that was covered in eyes
keep
and
in mind,
stuff like that.
Let's understand something a second before you go any further. Allegory and symbolic are two completely different things.
Right.
If you look at Galatians chapter 4, Paul is dealing with an allegory. I don't know a single dispensationalist who would ever claim that everything that they read in the Bible is literal.
Right. Absolutely.
Hal Lindsey said that as much. But let me give you a good example of this, and I do this all the time.
I went to Hal Lindsey's church.
Did you? Did you really?
That was the guy in California, right?
Yeah.
He was my neighbor.
He was your neighbor?
No way.
Yeah, in Whittier, California. I lived across the street from him.
If you see him again, tell Hal I said hi. Hey, let me get. Here's what I did. I in Matthew 20, 24, 29, sun, moon, and stars. And here's what I did. I looked at dispensational commentaries,
such as, if you don't mind me asking.
And I went back. To
such as Uncle Gary. Miles is just asking. Give him a couple commentaries that you kind of are referencing with dispensational worldview on this.
Well, there's one that it's a 2-volume commentary. One on the Old Testament, one on the New Testament. Almost all of them, all of the commentators were from Dallas Theological Seminary.
DTS.
I can't remember the exact title of it. If I could get to my computer, I'd be able to do it. So 2-volume, one on the Old Testament, one on the New Testament, and I looked at their interpretation of the sun, moon, and stars language when it's used in the Old Testament, and without exception, I believe, without exception, they all take the position that I take, that this is descriptive, symbolic language describing the judgment of nations. And so, why would that change when you get to Matthew chapter 24, 29, especially when Jesus says in verse 34, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And every time this generation is used in the New Testament, it always, without exception, refers to the generation to whom Jesus is speaking. Never refers to a future generation. You got the near demonstrative this. Can't refer to race. It's a wrong Greek word. Genea means generation. Look at Matthew 1:17. It always means generation. So this generation refers to the generation to whom Jesus is speaking. The language on sun, moon, and stars is taken right out of the Old Testament, and all the dispensational commentaries, when you look at their commentary, their comments dealing with that sort of stellar language, will say it refers to, this is symbolic language of judgment upon nations. And so why would that all of a sudden change when Jesus uses the same language, judgment language, in Matthew chapter 24? Then you have to have a good reason, and so in the Book of Revelation, you got a third of the stars that are cast down to the earth. Well, our sun is a star. How does the earth survive when a third of the stars are thrown down to the earth, and then you have a big computer system we won't be able to buy or sell in Revelation chapter 13? How's that possible in the chapters before this, when the earth was just torn completely to pieces, vaporized by a third of the stars falling to the earth? So I'm not the guy who allegorizes. In fact, I have a standing offer. I said I'll debate any dispensationalist, and I will be more literal than they will be. And that's why, and that's why they won't debate.
Well, let me.
You got to.
Well, hold on. I want to hear from Miles real quick, because Miles. So just.
I do too.
Yeah, just first of all, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being a good sport. I really appreciate it. Seriously, he'll beat me up later for this.
What kind of sport are you, Miles?
One is going to put his fist in my face. After
are you a willful sporty?
No. But so you are a dispensational. What is it that convinces you ultimately? What is it that you're saying? You know what? This to me is the clearest reading of Scripture. What holds you to that? And then what would it take for you to say, okay, maybe I need to work. Maybe I need to rethink this.
Okay. That's a good question, and I feel like the closest I can get to sufficiently responding to it is my view of Israel, and I do not hold a replacement theology, and so I believe that God's promises and gifts are irrevocable.
Settle down, Uncle Gary. Settle down.
And I'm not talking about them becoming a nation in 1948. I'm just talking about what we know in Scripture as far as God's covenant and promises to them. Yeah. And I know that the argument is Romans 9, 10, and 11 and such. But really, where my view of Israel is important, I believe, is in Revelation chapter 9, the 70 weeks of Daniel. If I could get a sufficient, a satisfactory response of what you do with that final week, the 70th week that is unaccounted for in the prophetic timeline, which was literal from the going forth of the building of Jerusalem in Nehemiah chapter 2, obviously to the desolation in 70 AD, then where is that final week? The Amil, I think, would say that it's already happened. I'm kind of unfamiliar because it's been a while since
Amil's irrelevant. That's okay.
All right, cool. So everybody here is post mill.
You're throwing out a whole bunch of stuff here.
Right.
Let me because we're anyway. I found the commentary. It's called the Bible Knowledge Commentary, an exposition of the Scriptures by Dallas Seminary faculty. This is the Old Testament. Let me read you this. This is from Isaiah chapter 13, which is that where Jesus is actually borrowing that language. And the author of this, now this is a Dallas Theological Seminary professor. I think it's Dwyer. I'm not sure. It doesn't really matter because he's a Dallas Theological Seminary professor. Doesn't know who it is.
Wow.
The statements in Isaiah 13:10 about the heavenly bodies, stars, sun, moon, no longer function. They figuratively describe that. Listen to this: the total turnaround of the political structure of the Near East. The same would be true of the heavens trembling and the earth shaking, verse 13, figures of speech suggesting all-encompassing destruction. So this is a dispensational dispensationalist. Now, if I had read that to a dispensationalist and didn't say where it came from, they would accuse me, oh, you're allegorizing the Bible. And I said, well, if I'm allegorizing, then so is the professor at Dallas Theological Seminary allegorizing. But we're not allegorizing. We're taking the word literal means taking something according to its literature.
Uncle Gary,
this particular literature that Jesus is using is descriptive of wholesale judgment upon nations. Now, you brought up the issue of replacement theology.
Yeah,
these are code words. I debated Michael Brown over the issue of replacement theology.
Isn't he post mill though?
I don't know anybody.
He's post-mill.
I don't believe anybody believes in replacement. Nobody that I know of believes in replacement theology. My position, which is the biblical position, is
wow. How do you really feel, Uncle Gary?
To the Jew first and then the Greek. To the Jew first, then to the nations. Gospel goes to Israel. Acts chapter 2, verse 5 says there were Jews living in Israel, listen to the language, from every nation under heaven. Now, if you want to maintain that there were Jews there from China and the Americas and so forth, you would be going beyond what even the dispensationalists would say. but they were the ones that first heard the gospel. Tens of thousands of Jews embraced Jesus Christ as the promised Redeemer, just like Jesus had said he would. There's no postponement of the of the 70th week of Daniel. 70 follows 69. The first 3.5 years of the 70th week of Daniel is Jesus' ministry. The next 3.5 years completes the prophecy related to Israel. And then you get Peter, Peter who is in Joppa. He is in Joppa, the same place Jonah was when he refused to go to Nineveh. And Peter is given this vision of a sheet that comes down out of heaven with unclean animals on it, and God says, "Take, kill, and eat." And Peter said, "I've never eaten any unclean thing." And God says, "Don't call unclean what I call clean." And what happens? The gospel goes to the Gentiles, goes to the nations. And what happens to those nations? Is that a separate people of God? No. They're grafted into an already existing Jewish church. So there is no such thing as a replacement theology. What you have here is an expansion of the covenant promises, first given to Israel, and then the Israelites, and then the nations are grafted into one new man in Christ. So this idea of replacement theology is something that the dispensationalists have created in order to, as a tagline to say, oh, they believe that the Jews don't count anymore. Look, it's the postmillennialists who believe that the Jews in the future are going to be saved. It's the dispensationalists who believe that 2/3 of the Jews during the tribulation period are going to be destroyed in what Charles Ryrie calls Israel's greatest bloodbath. You guys, the dispensationalist has to separate the 70th week of Daniel from the 69th week. And yet, if you look at Daniel chapter 9, it's Daniel who's reading Jeremiah, and he sees the 70 years of captivity, and he sees it coming to an end, and then he gets the prophecy of the 70 weeks of years. If there's a gap between the 69th and 70th week of years, nearly 2,000 years, why wasn't there a gap between the 69th and 70th week of the captivity? What if God had said at the end of the 69th week, oh, what I'm going to do is put this as a postponement, and you're going to still be in captivity for 2,000 years, but I'm not going to count it, and the prophecy clock's not going to start back up again until the 70th year, after 2,000 years. Makes no sense.
Yeah,
That's not interpreting the Bible literally.
Let me kind of wrap this up, and really,
because Uncle Gary can keep going. If you haven't noticed, when they make Red Bull, they pull it from his veins. So just in case you didn't know.
Uncle Gary will keep going. Uncle Gary, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's just a blessing to have you on.
Get Last Days Madness.
That's a great.
What are some of the other ones?
Myth, Lies, and Half Truths.
Yeah, I haven't read that one. I'd like to pick that one up.
Worth your time if you care about these issues.
Why the end of the world is not in your future.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, go ahead and get some.
And big thanks to Miles.
Miles Ornelas. That's right.
What a trooper.
Let me get one comment here. We can close it out. I think it was Spurgeon who said, if you knew Jesus was coming back tomorrow, what would you do? And this is to the pre-mill side of things and to the post-mill side of things.
Yeah.
If you knew Jesus was going to come back tomorrow, what would you do? And Spurgeon said, well, I'd plant a tree. I'd do what God has called me to do, and I would think. And basically, Spurgeon said, I would think long term.
Yeah. Yep.
So no matter what, pre-mill, post-mill,
next we're going to work on Miles becoming Presbyterian.
I don't baptize babies.
Hey,
that's child abuse.
One thing at a time.
Oh, this is Cross Politic. Until next week, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Go fight, laugh, and feast.